I'll record and I'll send this out for you guys. Try to adjust my blind here. Okay, so let's do a screen share. We'll just quickly go through the contract. I know that I did do this last week a little bit, so I'm not going to spend too much time on it. For those of you that did have this as homework, was there any questions in terms of how to fill anything in, or did you run into any problem areas? No, Sarah, you're good. Jessica, you're okay. Okay.
Yeah, I think I'm okay.
Okay, so this is actually Kim's that I have here up on the screen. So you know, she's obviously got her clients in there. She's got her contract number. That's perfect. She's got the information here in full, which is great. She's got her goods included all listed. We've got our purchase price and possession in there. We've got our seller brokerage. We'll be providing the documents to lawyers. We've got our deposit piece in there, and great that she's got a date in there. Everything looks pretty straightforward. We've got our condition pieces filled in here. So on hers, this is probably just a quick error, but this would be your time piece, and then your date would go there, which makes sense. And I did talk to you guys about the fact that you very possibly wouldn't even be putting a percentage into this. You definitely can, but you can also leave it blank depending on the client circumstance. And in this case, matching up your condition times so that they are the same, and if possible, the same days, just so you have one less thing to worry about if you're removing conditions for a client. And I think that's pretty much it. And then obviously we've got this section kind of filled out in full. So we definitely want the full address in here for the properties, but and the contact information for the client as well as your own selves. So when we get to this part of the agreement, we can see she's put a deadline in here. Now, this is one place where I would encourage you guys to put a time. So I think that in the previous training session, Kim had asked about the listing, and even on like on the representation agreements, they have like contract starts on and contract ends on, and there's a date in there and there's a time slot. In those places, I'm totally fine with you guys not putting a time. In this, on an offer to purchase, if you're going to include the time clause, please do put a specific time in as well. If it is 11:59 p.m., then great, write in 11:59 p.m. We don't want to leave anything with a purchase contract sort of open for interpretation or questions. So that's for sure what I would write in there. And then my buyer, if this was my buyer and I wrote this offer, they would go through and initial the bottom of every single page, anywhere they have the buyer's initials. So this section and the bottom of everything, and then they would sign the offer section. So we're going to deliver a signed offer over. If you do counter back in writing, we want you to have your client, if you're on the seller side, they will still sign section 18. So I always say kind of treat section 18 like it says acceptance / it almost should just say offer, because I think you guys are taught this, and if you aren't, you should be, that any counter is actually like a new offer. It's a rejection of the offer you received, and it's an offer delivered back. So if Nicole wrote an offer on one of my listings and I did a written offer back to her, now it's my seller's offer to her buyers. So there's actually no such thing in contract law as a counter offer. It's actually just a new offer. It's a rejection of the offer that came in and then a new offer delivered back. So I always wish that in section 18, they had written it as like seller's offer. And so that's why your seller will sign it. Even though we know that there's no agreement yet from the other side, we want our seller's signature on that contract. So if you deliver a contract back in writing, then your seller will put their signature on it. So likewise, the seller would go through, initial everywhere, sign here, and they will have struck. I'll go back up to the first page because this is the most likely scenario, is they would have struck out the price here and written their new price in, and they would have applied then a set of initials. Okay, now the buyer receives that and they may counter or accept. So counter, again, it was a rejection and a resubmission of a new offer back. Any change that's made needs the initials of all parties. You don't just initial the things that you agree to, you initial changes. So when you think about making a change on a contract, really think about it's an acknowledgement that a change was made rather than an acceptance of the change. So I'm going to actually download this to PDF, and then I can write on it and I can just kind of show you guys what I'm talking about, because I know that piece can be a little bit. Actually, let's go.
This is kind of what confuses me, because I thought you guys said that you cannot even edit this, like you need an amendment.
While you're in negotiations, you can edit this all you want.
Oh, so the final one you need to,
Yeah, so once, let's say that this agreement that we're looking at, I'm just, while I'm talking to you, I'm just gonna pull something up, but let's say that the agreement that we're looking at right now is what everybody agreed to, and it's signed and delivered. So now we're technically pending or in a binding contract. That's when we can't make any changes to this contract. But when it's open and being negotiated, absolutely, you're making your changes right onto this document. Okay. So I'm going to try, does that make sense?
yeah.
Okay. Did that flip over? Are you guys looking at my editable contract here? Yeah. Okay, perfect. So let's see if this, oh, I might just need to change something here. I'll stop share for a second. Sorry, I'm going to try to use my touch screen and just write onto the contract. So I just want to make sure that you guys can see what I'm doing. Okay. No, are you looking? Oh, there we go. Okay. Okay, so here's our purchase contract. Let's see if it lets me do this. I'm going to try to write on it, which it may not let me do. Let's see here. Okay, so if I was going to counter this contract, I would basically, obviously you can do this a little neater. I would strike out the price there, and then I would insert the new price. So I would put a new price in here of, let's say we countered at, this one was at 720. So let's counter back at, 690 or whatever it is. Okay. So if I was working with this and I was going to deliver this counter back in writing to the other party, my client now would initial to the side of this. So we would end up having, in this case, we have, this is the seller, they've received the buyer's offer and they're making a change to it. We have Jason and Tara here. So they both would be putting their little initials to the side of this. And then I would be sending this contract back. In this case, I'm going to use Nicole as my buyer rep. So my seller has changed the price. They also will have gone through and initialed the bottom of each of these pages. And so now Nicole gets this and her clients are like, yeah, we're not going, we're not doing 690. We want to counter price. So again, let's say that this price is struck out again. And Nicole's clients counter back, let's say at 710. Okay. Fill it in properly, but just do it like that. So we've got now a counter back again. So tell me what you think Nicole's clients should be doing in this case. So Nicole's clients wrote at 720. She's the buyer's rep. I got it. My seller's countered back. This doesn't make sense. Let's flip it around the other way. The buyer's countered. This is a higher number. And so now we're sitting at this 710 number, right? So it's bouncing back and forth between the two clients. So Nicole's clients are going to initial what? Does anybody know?
My clients would be initialing the 710, right?
Okay. So let's go B. We'll put B's in here for your clients. Okay.
Because Geneva, if I remember correctly, because when my buyers bought, I think we only negotiated like 2 different numbers. So everything was still like perfectly legible. And so we were able to keep like the original offer, but you only have to write like a brand new one if you have like a whole bunch of different signatures and there's things everywhere and it's not really legible, right?
I mean, you can decide why you're rewriting a contract. In this business, we tend to not rewrite contracts very often unless, like it becomes really convoluted. That being said, there's a lot of risk in rewriting a contract if you've done all of your counters in writing. So usually the reason that we're not rewriting contracts is because there's a lot of verbal, like instead of us countering back and forth here on paper, we tend to do a little bit of, hey, Nicole, my clients are countering at this number. And then, hey, Geneva, thanks, but my clients are counting. And then we get to, okay, you agree? Yeah, we agree. Now let's change the contract. So the scenario that I'm kind of playing out here would be more so if you did a little more of the paper written counter offers, more likely you're going to have one change to the contract, which everybody's sort of verbally agreed upon. Now we're going to put it in paper. Everybody's going to initial that change, and then we're good to go. But on the odd occasion, you're going to get to a point where somebody actually delivers a counter back to you in writing, and you're going to need to know how to handle multiple changes on a contract, right? So typically now we're dealing with one set of changes because it's sort of all been verbally agreed upon, and now we're just going to put it back into the paper copy. So the contracts that we used to have were all done in writing. And so these changes, we would sometimes have the price counters 6, 7, 8 times. So definitely they're a little cleaner than they used to be, but my concern of rewriting a contract is that something can get missed. So there's a high risk in taking a contract and rewriting it from the get-go unless you're like doing a great job at the check and balance. We've had realtors miss appliances out by mistake. We've had, and all of a sudden you're buying your client a washer and dryer because on the rewrite we forgot to include it or something, right? So there's some risk in that. So it's a very rare circumstance that I would actually have somebody rewrite a contract in full.
Makes sense.
Okay, so we've got 2, you guys can see this on the screen, you've got 2 changes to the price, and now everybody's going to agree to 710. So the problem is that if this is where we stopped in terms of initials, we're missing a set, because how many changes are there to this contract? To price, there's 2. We started at 720, we changed it to 690, and then we changed it again to 710. So there's 2 changes that occurred to price to get to that last number. So then if there's 2 changes, how many sets of initials do we need?
2.
From everybody, correct. And the reason is that when Nicole and I are negotiating this agreement, she knows when she initialed and when her clients initialed and when my clients initialed, because she's a part of the flow and the process. She knows that her clients change the price to 710 and applied a set of initials. But if you flatten this agreement out and you deliver it to a third party that wasn't a part of negotiations to look at, how would they know which number everybody actually agreed to? Somebody could have easily added that number after and not got everybody's acceptance on it. So what would happen in this case, if this was truly our contract, is that Nicole's clients would initial their new price of 710, but they actually would also put their initials over here to capture this change. And then this one goes with this change, and same, this set of initials kind of follows this. So that means that we need these people to also initial over here. So if I was an administrator looking, or a lawyer looking at this file, I go 1 change, 2 change. That means I need 2 sets of initials. There's 1, there's 2, there's 1, there's 2. So that's how we count and look at the initials.
And if there was no initial on the end one, would the lawyer third party return it and get it signed?
So
Or-
we try to catch it at an administrative level for you guys. If we are able to, we'll come back and say, hey, I mean, first hope and goal would be that you catch it. And I have one right now where I'm waiting for the realtor. Actually, I'll pull it up because it'd be kind of interesting for you guys to look at. But probably the lawyer would still execute and close the file. The risk comes in is if a buyer is looking at it later and they're looking for an out. And this is the best example I can give is if you get a speeding ticket, like actually get pulled over on the side of the road and get a speeding ticket, which rarely happens anymore. When you get that ticket, what is one of the first things that you do?
Throw it to the side of my passenger.
Good answer. And then when the reality hits in that you have to pay it, what do you do? Would you look at it for errors?
Yeah.
You should. Because if the constable made an error on that ticket, what happens?
You don't have to pay.
You don't have to pay it.
You don't have to pay it. An error means it's not binding. So if I have a contract that I've done with my client and they do not, and we do not make sure that we have a legally binding agreement, okay, 99% of the time, nobody will notice, everybody still wants to move forward, that contract will probably close. But if you have a buyer that all of a sudden is looking for an out and they start looking at that agreement, or a seller for that matter, and they're looking for a break in this agreement and they find one, they will be able to use that to exit the contract. So yes, you're right. Well, your question is a valid one in that, is it going to stop the process? No, it's probably not going to stop the process. Probably it'll close and very few people would notice, but we also are hired to, under reasonable care and skill, make sure that our clients are protected at the highest and best level. And we definitely want to get to a position where we know that we've done everything we can to protect the client from something that could go awry. So that's definitely something that we want to be thoughtful about. So I'm going to try to just open this agreement that I recently did and we'll scrutinize it if it's going to open for me. There we go. Did that flip over? You guys looking at my condo purchase contract here? Okay. Okay, so when this contract came into me, this agent did quite a poor job, in my opinion, of filling it out. He didn't have any information for my seller's name, so we added that, which is why we have a set of initials around the seller's name. So an unnecessary change, but because the agent did an incomplete contract, I had to do that, okay? So we can see all of this information is good. So to Nicole's point, here is one change to price. We for sure, it goes from 177 to 205. We for sure countered back and forth, right? There was a lot of verbal back and forth, but we made one change to the agreement. One change equals one set of initials from everybody. So there we go, we're good. And you can see at the bottom of this page, we've also got a set from everybody. Okay, so now we come over here. Again, there was an issue where the agent did not write this into his original contract. Not sure why, lazy, maybe just forgot, I'm not sure. So I wrote it in, again, now it's a change, everybody had to initial it. So it's an unnecessary set of initials, because if he'd done it properly, we wouldn't have had to worry about it, but because I added it on our counter back from our seller, then we got initials. Okay. Now let's go into conditions. So there's no change on that page. And so now we go down here. So we can see we've got these initials are the bottom. Okay, this was a condition that I added in. Talk to me about what you're seeing here, about this condition that got added in. Do you notice anything missing? What's over here?
Probably not what you're looking for, but what is grant of probate?
Okay, yeah, I can talk to you about that in a minute.
Okay, thanks.
So we have a seller's condition and we have the seller's signatures or initials. How do I know the buyer agreed to this change?
There's no buyer.
Right. They never got an initial by the buyer's side. So currently we're acting under this being a pending agreement. I've told the agent that he's missing these. He's like, okay, yeah, no problem, but I'm going to have to follow up with him again and get it. Now we're still acting as if we're pending because that's how he's acting. So he said, we're good. I sent it all back. We're pending, blah, blah, blah. We're carrying on. And I said to him, hey, your buyers missed initialing the seller's condition 8.3. Can you get those initials and send them back to me? So we're still pending right now. So I'm not like freaking out about it, but technically, Sarah, back to your point, if his clients wanted out of this agreement, they could just come back and say, we actually never agreed to this change, therefore we don't have an agreement, we don't have a contract. So there's a hole in this paperwork that I have right now. Now look at this page. Okay, remember, we did a verbal contract. We went back and forth and agreed to everything verbally, and then we made the changes. So what the F is happening here? Right? Look at all these initials. So here's the things that have happened. He wrote this, says subject to estate seller receiving grant of probate November 10th. Now, you guys are just learning the difference between terms and conditions and starting to figure that out. If you were to remove that line and that was sitting in section 9, what do you think about that? Do you see why I received this contract and said, that's not a term, that's a condition? We need to move it. It isn't even written properly. Like what does November 10th mean? There's no year there. That's a third party looking at this. There is super unclear. It's also a condition, which is what I asked him. It says subject to, which is how we write conditions. And for whatever reason, he just plunked it into the middle of the contract under terms. So we struck it out. We moved it up to here, I did, and initialed it. So he added this, we've struck it. I can't remember, I think when he sent it to me, he'd had his clients initial it, but anyways, one change, we're looking for counting initials. So we've got for sure one set of the sellers, one set of the buyers. There's a couple extras floating around in there. I think he had his clients initial it right from the get-go, but extra sets are okay. Short, not good. Extras, not worried.
Well,
Okay.
why didn't you cross it out on the other page?
Because it is a condition we want.
Oh.
So he wrote the contract, the buyer's agent wrote it and put it here. I told him, you need to include a seller's condition. It's subject to them getting grant of probate, which has to do with the courts and the estate. It's an estate sale. And I told him to include a seller's condition. He wrote it here. When I got the contract, I said, that's the wrong spot for it. That's the terms section. So I rewrote it up here.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So we've got this being struck out, now we've added some stuff down here. He did not include this part, this part of the terms when he wrote the original offer. So in negotiation, I said, did you see that we want the deck? Da, 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 da. Yes, he said, I saw that. I also said to him, or he said, my clients would like some furniture. That was part of negotiation. So we added those things in. So we have, again, a set of initials here and a set of initials here. So I can see that those changes, and again, he's got a random another set of initials here. I don't know why he put a bunch of initials in the wrong spots. You know, we'll just carry on with it. But again, if I look at this and see two changes here, so really the changes to the contract were the striking of this and the insertion of this. I need at least 2 sets of initials from everyone. In this case, we've got lots, so we don't have to worry.
Do typos matter? Except deck as it.
Yeah, it's yes, that is an issue for sure. So that should probably be clarified, and what we can do that be now, because we're, you know, we can actually make that change because we're technically not pending because we were missing this set of initials up here. So we definitely could go back and make that slight correction in there, because technically this contract is still open, or we could do it on an amendment where we just clarify the language. Yeah. Okay. And then you can see we've got initials on that page. We've got everybody's information in here, and then everybody's signed off on the agreement. Okay. So even though we did a verbal negotiation, the contract still kind of gets a little messy. So you guys, the biggest thing I want you to remember is changes equal initials. I don't care if your client agrees with the change or not. If it's struck and rewritten, it's a set of initials. Each time that happens, it's a set of initials. So counting changes equal, that's the easiest way to remember it as you go through. Okay. And a lot of realtors struggle with this piece. So definitely you'll be chasing initials a lot. Okay.
I've noticed that the witness section typically isn't filled in. Are you signing as a witness?
Well, you can always sign as a witness as long as you've seen it being witnessed. But we do so much electronic signing that if I don't see somebody sign, I'll never witness that part of the contract. If there's somebody, and we don't really ask our client to have a witness unless there's somebody present that they ask about. Witnessing does not make a contract binding. It's just, you know, it's just a piece of our contract that helps with enforceability, but it doesn't make it not valid without having a witness. It's just an extra layer. So unless you can witness, as long as you see somebody sign. Okay.
I learned in my course that keys to success also, that when they sign on DocuSign, it the computer will put in a little verb there.
Yeah, we get a little authentication piece. Yeah. And we get a summary document back that shows the IP address. It shows, you know, Geneva Tatro, and this identifies as my unique signature, and I agree that that's my unique signature. So there's a whole authentication piece that follows with it. But even before that, before we even had that, if we did not see somebody sign an agreement, we definitely wouldn't witness it. We could ask them to find a witness and have that witness happen there, but definitely you don't want to witness anything if you don't actually see it be signed. Okay, so yes, because of our electronic signing, very frequently that stuff is blank now. Okay, so let's jump over, and we're gonna change to now and go into listing presentations, unless you guys have any other questions on that offer to purchase.
What was that probate thing?
Oh yeah, okay. So probate is, what happens is when somebody passes away, their will stay to the executor or executrix is. Executrix is just a female. And basically that person is assigned the duties of liquidating the estate and executing the will. So when that happens, if the property has not been left to somebody, willed to somebody, and it's to be liquidated, the executor then will be tasked with selling that property, and they act as a third party to the contract. That being said, a will has to be confirmed in the courts before you actually can execute the estate. So it gives an opportunity for other family members or somebody to contest the will and say, hey, at the last minute, you know, Sister Jane jumped in and had them change it and we don't agree, or whatever. So there's a period of time from when the executors activities are invoked. So somebody passes away and the executor gets invoked, but before they really can start to liquidate anything, they need to the lawyers need to confirm the validity of the will. So that is basically called a grant of probate, what it means is that the lawyer would make an application to the courts and say, this is the will. We don't have any reason to contest it, and we would like you to approve it. So complicated situations where there's a bunch of family members and maybe there is some people contesting the will, that whole probate period takes way longer, because they actually will often send the will out to everybody, ask anyone if they have any questions or concerns, if there are any issues with the way the will is written. And then once they receive feedback on that, then they'll send it into the courts for grant of probate. So grant of probate basically is the courts acting in the best interest of the estate, saying, yes, you can now move forward as the will states. It gives the rights to the executor to liquidate the property. So we can't sell a property fully until that grant of probate has happened. So if you have a client that phones you and says, oh my God, my father just passed away and we want to get his house on the market right away, your question immediately would be, have you talked to your lawyer? Where are you in the probate period? Is that approved yet? In my client's situation, it was an elderly gentleman. His wife had predeceased him. There's 3 siblings that are working together. The delay in things was minimal because of all those variables. He didn't have any other kids, so it was pretty straightforward. And the lawyer told me she needed 2 weeks to prepare paperwork, and then they were going to submit for probate or grant of probate, and they needed about 2 to 3 weeks for grant of probate. So that means that if I list it right away, but we get an offer before that's completed, I need to protect my seller's interest by including a condition, so that if for some reason the courts rejected the request for probate, that we don't get caught selling a property that we actually don't have authority to sell yet. Okay, so it gives my seller the ability to get out of it. But a lot of people want to get the house up on the market because they don't there's a delay in selling it, and there's cost incurred as soon as the estate takes over that property. And if all the money is tied up, if you think about the way estates work, is if somebody has a property that has a lot of expenses connected to it, the family would be responsible to pay all of the costs until the money and everything freed up from the estate. So a lot of families say, let's get the property on the market ASAP, because this is costing us a lot of money out of pocket. Yes, we're going to reimburse, but when? So people kind of want to get a jump on it. So you do need to slow people down a little bit and make sure that they've gone through the right steps. And I work directly with the lawyer. So, we got an offer. I emailed her, said, hey, heads up, we're negotiating an offer. Can you reconfirm what time frame you think you need for your probate? She and I'd already talked about the term that she wanted to see in there, the condition. So I already knew exactly what that would look like. And I put it in the listing. So when the realtor wrote the offer, he also was like, I saw you have a note there about probate. What's the update on that? Blah, blah, blah. So we were really ahead of it. So it never kind of came back to bite us.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Okay, let's go into listing presentation here. So this one's a little bit long, so we'll see how we make out for time, and we can always stop if we run out. Okay, so you guys know, or maybe you've heard me speak of this before, but we encourage a 2-step listing process for a couple of reasons. So one, as a new agent, that is the best way to do it. But secondly, actually, as I think an efficient realtor, it's a nice way to do your business, and I still do a 2-step. So there's got dual benefit to you guys. The reason that I like a 2-step is it helps me build better rapport, do better research, establish a better relationship with the client. It takes away from the client picking me on price and more about picking me on service. So this is something that you definitely should bring into your business. I think James does this a lot as well. I don't think that it's the best way to do a market evaluation is to arrive at the client's house basically without even seeing it and already bringing a number value into that appointment. How can I know what the condition is? They could have had crazy pets that destroyed it, kids that have run amok in the home, maybe they've renovated it. So how do I know what it's really going to look like? And therefore, how can I do a proper assessment until I've seen the property? So this allows us to slow the process down a little bit, which, like I said, is also really nice for you guys as new agents, because it builds a little bit of gap time in where you can circle back to James and I and say, okay, I need help with pricing on this. So the flow is here, and we'll dive down into these a little bit more, but basically we're going to gather some general information, do a little bit of preliminary research. We're going to go see the client for the first appointment, which is about investigation and rapport building. Then we go back to our office. We're going to do some research, complete that CMA and marketing strategy, book a second time to meet with the client, go through the pricing and marketing strategy. And then of course, you're going to finish up with your timelines, finish up paperwork, and prep to go live. I think about my listing practice when I think about what I do for work for my client. I have my business structured so about a third of my work is actually before we even get the listing up on the system. So if I look at my paycheck for my listing or that workload, and a third of it is pre-listing, is a lot of work, and I treat it very seriously. Okay, so this is a whole bunch of things that we're doing just to get the business. So that initial call comes into you. What we want you to do is on the phone, get the client chatting a little bit. I say, I just need some basics from you over the phone, and then we can dive in a little deeper when I come to see you. So obviously we need the address. Ask them if they know the approximate size, year built, bedrooms, bathrooms, is the basement finished, garage. You can ask them if they've done any renovations. I just get enough information to get a ballpark kind of idea of what I'm walking into. Okay. So once I do that with them, I'm going to say, you know, what are you looking for time frame? Let's book an appointment. I make sure that they understand that I am going to do a two-step process. So I don't call it that. Obviously, what I say is, you know, hey, Jessica, this is great. I can come. How's Wednesday at 1? Wednesday at 1 works great. So I say, okay, this is how it works is I'd like to come meet with you, explain a little bit about how I do business. I want to have a tour of your home. Then I'll leave. I'll do a bunch of research, come to a conclusion on price, and then I'll book a second appointment to come back and just chat with you. We can finalize pricing. I can explain that, show you where I think it should be, and talk about a marketing strategy. Are you okay with me coming a couple of times? And I find actually people really appreciate when we slow the process down, because it feels like it gives them a bit of breathing room as well. But make sure they know that's your plan. Because if you do that and somebody expects you to deliver a price at your first appointment, you're going to get caught scrambling. So make sure they understand that that initial appointment isn't about you giving them a number. Okay. And as long as you get consent on that, then I also want to confirm that all owners are going to be present. The reason I want all owners present is because if I meet with Sarah and we have great rapport and we go through all these things and I spend an hour there and everything is great, and then I leave and Sarah's husband comes home and they talk, and all of a sudden he's like, well, I got Tim down the street. He's got no rapport with me. So all of a sudden, all that work I did with one person kind of can get lost. And I either have to go back and do it a second time to now get the spouse on board, or sometimes I lose out entirely because they just are like, no, so I talked to Joe at work today and he told me to use so-and-so. So really try to get your owners all together at once. And additionally, if people have kids, I offer to come later. So those of you with kids, that's a little bit more challenging, but the amount of times I've said to people, hey, what time is bedtime? How do you feel about me coming after your kids are in bed? People with little kids appreciate that so much, and you get their undivided attention. It is very hard to be fully engaged in a conversation when kids are running around in the background, both for me and for the client. So going at 8 or 8:30, you know, it's an evening appointment, but clients really appreciate that. So if you're able to accommodate something like that, you try to do it. So my preliminary research, I'm going to for sure punch the address into the MLS and see if there's any old listings, previous listings that I can get an idea of. If there is, it's really nice to see that the client bought it this time for this price. They tried to list it 5 times before. They've never listed it in 20 years, whatever it is. It's nice to have a little bit of that background. I always pull the tax assessed value because I want to know what number they may have seen. If they've seen something that says their home is worth $650, whether it's correct or not, I want to know that, because if I come in and tell them it's worth $7, or I come in and tell them it's worth $550, those are totally different conversations, right? So I want to be geared up so that I know I'm going to be delivering disappointing news, or I'm going to be delivering super exciting news. This is the only number that people see on a regular basis, is the city tax assessment. So they put value in it because they don't know where else to look. So we need to be thoughtful that they have that information. I want to know what it is.
Geneva,
yeah,
sorry.
no
Where
problem.
would we pull the tax assessed value?
No worries, I'll show you. So Edmonton's is really the easiest, but almost any, if you Google for anywhere, like if it was Strathcona County property assessed value or whatever, they have sites and all that information is public knowledge. So if we're dealing with Edmonton, just are you guys following me? Did my screen change?
Yep.
Okay, so I go to the maps.edmonton website. If it's an Edmonton property, we can do an address lookup here. And this is where we would just punch the information in. I'm gonna just pull a old address that's in my head. And then over here, we just need to check off the assessed values. So you can see that assessed value. And I can actually, if I click on the assessment tab, and I actually print this out and I put it into my listing presentation, but you can see that this person has been told, if they believe it or not is a different discussion, but they've been told their property value right now is $338,500. And you can get that assessed value for any property in any area. You just have to find the right website. And if not, you can always call a county office or something if it's outside of the immediate area.
Okay. So like with my listing, since it's in Sturgeon County, I could just Google like Sturgeon
You
County
sure could.
properties.
Yeah, just put in property, Sturgeon County property assessments or assessed value, and you should be able to get there.
Oh, cool. Perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You betcha. So also before I go, I pull title. Obviously, again, I chatted about knowing who owns the property. So I definitely ask this question. So I always say, you know, do you own the property with anybody else? Oh, yes, it's me and so. Okay, great. Are you both going to be present? Now I pull title to make sure that, you know, who they said is. Sometimes people forget that a parent co-signed. You know, they bought a property 10 years ago and they forget that mom ended up co-signing at the last minute and is on title with them. I also want to look for registrations. I want to make sure they're not upside down. If they bought it last year and they paid 600 and they're, you know, and I'm looking and I'm like, Jesus, like, I think we're selling this thing for 550. Well, the difference is $50,000. Can they actually sell it? Or are there other registrations on title that we should be concerned about, like Liz pendants, which means there's a lawsuit pending, foreclosure process starting, weird caveats, those kinds of things. So I always pull title so I have a really clear picture about the client's ability to sell. Okay. Then I'm going to do a general search in the area. I'm probably just going to punch in the community, maybe some general information. And I'm going to say, okay, well, I can see in this community houses in and around this, you know, age and size are selling between 400,000 and 500,000. I'm going to get a kind of a ballpark number. And I might be able to say, you know, based on condition, I can see like lower end is like 425. And as we get, you know, more renos and stuff, we're getting closer to 5, whatever. It's a ballpark. I kind of just get a feel of what's happening in that immediate community. I'm going to look at the location on the map. What's nice is that on the Edmonton map site is I can actually see that you saw that map view. I can tell if it backs a road, backs a park, you know, I can see things like that, but do a little bit of research on location before you go. Confirm market activity. So what's happening in that area? Were there 5 sales in the last month? No sales at all in the last year? What's happening? So bring a bit of that information in with you. And if you have a presentation that you can break into sections, then you would put all of that content into part 1 of your listing presentation. Okay. I arrive at my client's property this first time, usually with a little bit of information, like a couple of pages and my notebook. It's a very comfortable meeting without a lot of like in-depth conversation on things. So I find that they appreciate that I really just come in and say, hey, let's go sit down and let's talk. So here's my client appointment. It is a discovery meeting. I want to walk in, build value and trust. I want to build rapport. This is the way you kind of get your buy-in from your client. So immediately I say, hey, can we go sit down at the kitchen table and just chat a little bit before we get into your property specifically? Get them to a kitchen table if you can, or a dining room table. Make it a meeting. We've talked about professionalism and setting the bar and establishing that. This is about treating them as a client and starting that way right from the get-go. So take control. Can we sit down and have a little bit of a chat first? Great. Now I want to talk to them about the process. So remind them, we're going to talk a little bit here. Then I want to tour. Then I'll go do my work and I'll come back. Tell me about timing and motivation. What are you guys thinking? Are you thinking about listing in 6 months, in 2 weeks, tomorrow? What does that look like? And I find out a little more about why they're selling. Dig deep with this. This is absolutely important that you find out pain or pleasure. They hate that the drive to work is an hour. Okay, that's a great pain point that we're solving. They're building a new house and it's going to be ready soon. So there's timeline pieces in there. Timelines are super important because if they have a short timeline, they need to be more aggressive on price, right? So it's important that I know what their expectations are for pricing. And motivation is huge. You know, Nicole's got a client right now who they're motivated, but they're loose. They're not any interest in reducing right away. Their motivation is a little lacking. She may be challenged to remind them of the reason that they're going through what they're going through. And, you know, the goal, you guys hired me because the goal was to do X. You know, this is part of us getting there. And how long do we want to play this game before we get to that end result? So she needs to know the motivation. She can bring it back in and have it help her down the road with negotiating an offer or a price reduction or whatever. I love to ask them if they've used realtors before. And then I say, great, like what worked? If you used, you know, so-and-so before, what did you love about what they did and what did you not like? This is great information to have to build out a customized marketing strategy. If they said, we had terrible photos and we hate open houses, then I'm going to make sure I emphasize professional photos and say I'm not doing open houses, right? So if they don't, you know, this is great. They'll give you the answers so that you can embed that right back into your marketing strategy. What are they looking for in the realtor that they hire? And what needs to happen for them to choose a realtor? Ask for the business. Like, I'd love to work with you. I think this is a great property. I'm super excited to get back to you on price. You know, what things do you need to have happen to pick your agent? And if they say, we want to see what number you come back with, this is a great opportunity for you to educate them on how you don't set the market value. The market sets the value, and, you know, you're going to bring pricing back to them and they're going to look at it with you, and you guys will come to an agreement on price based on what they're hoping to get, but also what the market will bear. So you get an opportunity to redirect their thoughts into the right way to pick a realtor, which isn't the highest bidder. Okay. And then I always share a little bit about my business and how it works, you know, what my clients can expect, my long-term goal, whatever it is. So I like to build out a customized marketing plan. Here's how I deal with price. I don't pick it. I'm going to give you a range. You're going to get a low, a middle, and a high range. Together, we'll figure out the right price for you. So that's part of my whole thing. So you can establish all of that in number 1, client appointment 1. Then I say, great. So they've talked about what they need and want. I've talked about who I am and how I can help. Now I say, let's have a tour of the house. Tell me everything. So I like to have them tell me, when did they buy it? What did they pay for? I probably know those things because I already looked them up, but it doesn't matter. I get them talking. What work or renovations have you done? Any major items? So you want to talk about the furnace and the roof and, you know, hot water tank, water issues in the basement. Confirm all the basics, and also ask about any work that's on their radar that needs to be done. So I'm probably still sitting with them at the kitchen table at this point, writing all this stuff out, because this is something that, 1, I want them to see that I'm like taking notes, because I think that that's important that people see that. And 2, it's obviously a lot easier to ask these questions and get all the answers down on your notepad before you go walking around the property. I always ask them what they love about the house, and I ask them what they would change. If they knowing now what they know, what would you change? The reason I ask those questions is I like to really showcase the things that they love. And I like to be prepared for objections. If somebody says, I hate that it's across the street from the school, it's super busy. My clients maybe had the same, you know, concern, but they talked to me. I've already got some answers in place for when that objection comes up, because my clients told me that that's something that bugged them. Or we think about different ways that people could, you know, the laundry is in the wrong spot. Okay, what are the options? Could we drop laundry down? Could we take it up? So you can do some problem solving in advance. Okay. So let's have a tour of the home. I always ask them if they're okay if I take a few photos for my records only. People get really worked up if you grab your phone and start snapping pictures. We are often looking at houses before they're ready to go to market. So I always, before we get up, I say, I'm going to take some notes as we go, but also, do you mind if I take some photos of the space just for reference as I'm doing my work and research after? Nobody's ever said no to me, but I will tell you for sure, if you just pull out your camera, they get like anxious, like, oh no, like, you know, I didn't really get it ready yet. It'll look way different when we're good to go. So get their permission there. That's a respect thing. Again, helps build rapport and trust. And as we go around, I'm asking, are you leaving the appliances? How old are they? And then we talk about finishings and upgrades. And I go through each room. I write down flooring type. I, you know, write down whatever I need to write down. If you see repair and maintenance items, point them out. I always look at the ceilings and look for water staining. If I see it, I say, hey, there's a little bit of old water staining on the ceiling. What was that from? That's a question you might get. A buyer might ask you. So now you've got the answer. So you really want to be thinking about those things. And also sometimes pointing out some of the gap pieces in the home help with your pricing evaluation. The client that thinks their home is a castle and you're trying to help them understand that buyer's not going to pay for all the things that the seller values personally, sometimes pointing out some of the things that are less favorable or, you know, maybe need some maintenance, sometimes help with sort of rescaling the client's expectations back down. Okay. Obviously, I usually head back to the table to kind of conclude that meeting and say, you know, that I can have this done within a couple of days. Can we make another appointment right now for me to come back? Really encourage you to try to get back to them in person. I know you can do a CMA and email it. I know you can do a market evaluation and email it. It's harder to get client buy-in, or if they don't like the number that you've delivered back, you lose the ability to massage, work them through it, coach them, talk to them about why. So really encourage you to go back and have the face-to-face for the second meeting if possible. Ask, of course, if they have any more questions for you. You can make some general comments on price if you think you know, but be really careful if you haven't done the full research. So if they might say, what do you think the home is worth? You can say, well, everything in this area looks like it's selling between 4 and 5. Obviously, you need to range that in. You know, you're in pretty good shape. You've done a couple rentals. Otherwise, it's fairly, you know, standard property still. You're probably in the middle or low end or high end or whatever. You can make some general statements if you feel comfortable, but be careful because sometimes you go back to your computer and do a bunch of research and you're like, holy smokes, I'm way out to lunch on this. So be thoughtful about setting expectations. I always ask them what they think their home is worth. And I do it at this point because now we've built some rapport. So this is a great time for me to be like, you know, I'm going to do some research on price. What do you have any idea what you think your home is worth? You know, and are you willing to share that number with me? And some people are like, yeah, I think it's XYZ. And other people are like, well, that's your job. And I do have a number, but I want to see how close you're going to get. It's like a test. You know, and so that's fine if they say that, but always ask. You know, you never know. And it's awesome if they say, hey, we think it's worth 425. And in your evaluation, you come in at 460. Again, way more exciting news to deliver, right? So you know what kind of an approach you're going to have with that kind of a meeting. Okay, so now you're going to complete all your research. This is where you're going to run your CMA using similar homes in the area. We're going to look at community, property type, the size and range, garage, basement finishings, all of those things. We're going to make a list of all the things that we're going to adjust for. So I've got some examples of that on here. You can use Cloud CMA or the CMA tool in Paragon to do all of these adjustments. And the goal is, of course, to bring the homes in line with the comps. So if something is of lesser value, we're going to add the value in or remove it on anything that's got something better. Ideally, you're going to have 2 to 4 active properties and 4 to 8 solds. It depends though. If you don't have good comps, we'll pull them out. Good comps, a few good comps is way better than having lots of average comps, right? So there's too many adjustments, the prices get skewed. So if I go into a neighborhood and there's 4, you know, 1 active and 4 solds and they're all really good, same square footage, sort of same finishing, that's good. That's all I need. So don't get caught up in having too many of these. And you don't necessarily need to include terminated and expired. Definitely don't include them in the pricing pieces. You might include them just to show, here's this house, it's been trying at a higher price, it failed, they've reduced, and you know, whatever. So you can use it to bring context in, but don't use them for adjustments because you don't know how skewed those prices are. It's really hard to figure out how to get them to align. Yeah.
So when I was doing one for my daughter's grandparents, there was only one house that was in comparison in their area that was for sale or sold like in the last 10 years in Hallett Canyon.
Yeah.
So was it okay that I pulled like Britnell and
Yes.
Cybecker?
Yes, that's exactly what you should do. If you don't get that sort of, you know, 2 to 4 actives and 4 to 8 solds or whatever it is, you're struggling to find comps, you absolutely can look to some communities that are similar.
Okay.
Definitely what I would do is I would jump on the HPI and I would compare those 3 communities so I understand how the average house values differ in each of those 3 communities, but you can still use them. You could just apply that change then. So that HPI is really nice for that because I could pull those 3 and say in the last year, what's the average house price? And I'd be able to say, okay, you know, I have no idea, but Cybecker's slightly higher. So I do need to take that into consideration when I have a comp from that area or whatever, right? But yes, 100%. Usually you're able to kind of go into the immediate area, and then if needed, to expand into 2 or 3, 4, probably most comparable communities. And you're looking for same side of the busier roads that intersect them and those kinds of things. There's a little cluster of communities that will be similar.
Okay, that gives me a little confidence because I kind of
Yeah,
know
no,
what I'm
that's
doing.
100% correct. Yeah. I mean, if you pulled up Holly Kenyon and you had what you needed, then you wouldn't be worried about it. But for sure, you can't do a CMA on one, so you don't really have any other choice. You've got to go outside of that. Yeah, good question. Okay, so running a CMA, obviously what we're going to do is we have our subject property, and then you're going to say, take those, in this case, those 4 properties, and some are going to be better and some are going to be worse. So the ones that are better, we're going to subtract out what makes them better. So it brings them back into par with our subject. And the ones that are worse, we're going to add the value back in. So a worst one might be not renovated. So if my subject is renovated and my worst one is not, then I'm going to put the renovations into that property and add the value back in. This is going to come back up. So we have some examples here. So if I have a subject property and my comp is better. So let's say in this case, the comp has better location. To bring it down in location to be comparable to mine, doesn't back a park or whatever it is, I'm going to reduce the comp by $10,000. My comp also has a finished basement. My subject does not. I'm going to reduce my comp. So subtract out 30,000. And again, another example would be that the comp is larger in square footage. Therefore, I would reduce the comp by 30,000 as an example. Okay.
Is there a reason it's these numbers, or is this just an example? Like, how do you know what to reduce it and increase it by?
Yeah, so this is the hardest part for you guys as new agents doing CMAs, is that you don't know what numbers to give things. I do have a sheet that I can show you with some ballpark numbers on it. It's about the community and those kinds of things. Obviously, for example, if I was listing $1 million property and one of my comps had a better location, I'm probably not doing a $10,000 adjustment. I'm probably doing a $30,000 or $40,000 adjustment. On a $250,000 property, you know, maybe I'm doing a $5,000 adjustment. So there's a value sliding scale on those things as well. So it's not sort of one size fits all. And it is one of those areas where you need to gain some knowledge, and practice definitely helps. And we have a couple of tools you can use a little bit for this.
Okay, I think I need a course.
I'll show you that in a second here as we go through. So on the flip side, if I have my subject property with the comp that's in worse condition. So for example, maybe the comp doesn't have as many improvements, or maybe doesn't have as nice a yard area, or only is a single car garage, then I would be adding those things into the comp to make it the same as the subject. Okay, so we're adding value in. So once we finish all of that, we're going to take all of that information, we're going to finalize it into that presentation. So whether it's electronic or printed or both, whatever you decide, these are some ideas of things that you can include in that presentation. I definitely think you should include a little bio, a little bit about yourself, Century 21. You definitely could include some testimonials from clients and things as you go and start building that up in your business. That's a nice piece that rounds that out. You want to have your marketing strategy, which is basically that really specific list of everything you're going to do. So you guys remember some of the training pieces back from previous, where I talk about, you know, your different value propositions and different layers of the onion that you can add into your building your services to your clients. All of that stuff gets listed in here. I have a little section in mine about the subject property, which is where I include the Coles notes, I include title, I include the property tax assessment, I include any specific information on that property. If there's an old listing sheet, I include that too. So it shows that I've done some research. And then my CMA gets dumped in there with my adjustments. And usually at the end, it's got a range. I like to use a range of what the price recommendation would be. Okay, and then you can have an extra section if you want with some general market stats, or getting your house ready for sale, or, you know, whatever those things look like. Okay. So the reason I give a range is if really specific number people get stuck on. So a range creates an opportunity for conversation. I like to say, here's my range, the high price, a medium sort of in the middle, and then a little more aggressive price. So in this case, maybe my aggressive price would be $449.9, and the high price, if the market would allow for them to test a higher price, could be that $465. Maybe you could push it to $469, but bring it in. Obviously, the goal would be to have it somewhere in the middle. Okay, work through the numbers together, make sure they buy into what you're sharing and understand where the value has come from. You need to be able to explain why their home can't be listed for more. So if they come in and they're like, we wanted to list it at $499, I need to be able to say, here's a house at $499. Can you see the extra square footage? Can you see the extra rentals? Unfortunately, in this price point, this is the expectation, and I don't think you guys are quite there. So if we actually list it the same as this, we're just going to have people that go through your home and don't see the same value as the one down the street at $499 because you don't have the same kinds of upgrades and things. Does that make sense? So we want to make sure we can show them that, right? So be prepared for that. Can we go higher questions, and make sure you can show them what that looks like if you're able to. And then of course, we're going to go back, work through that, get the client buy-in, make sure they understand those price ranges, and start talking about timelines, ask for the business, and set out all of that, those next pieces in action there. So that's, as you flow through things, you naturally would kind of get to that end point there, but don't be afraid to ask for the business. You guys said you wanted to get going in a couple of weeks. It sounds like we can kind of agree on price. We can finalize that in 2 weeks before we list. I'd love to get my photographer in here. Do you want to do a staging walkthrough? Let's actually start talking about the service pieces again. Okay. So I'll add this last slide, and then I'll bring up those tools and resources that I have for you guys to see on the adjustments. So prepping for going live. This is where I talk to them about doing a staging walkthrough. I can, offer up my cleaner if they want to hire somebody in to clean the property once they've finished boxing things up. We do a full walkthrough of the property and say, get rid of that, box up this, box up that, clean this surface, remove these things. So we do this big walkthrough with our clients, and I tell them put things in boxes and put them in the basement. People can look past boxes. They can't look past, little knickknacks and stuff, and it clutters the photos. What's our launch date? And then I'm going to obviously be thinking about signage, all of those kinds of things, and RPR. This is a really important time to talk to them about RPR. If you have one, dig it out. Let's take a look. Let's get ahead of that conversation. Okay. So I know there's a lot of information here. This probably should be 2 sessions. I'm going to send you this so you can kind of look back through it, but let's have a quick look at, I'll stop sharing. I'll put my different screen here. And I'll show you guys the tools that we have for CMAs. So this is one resource that's really, really useful. It's done by an appraisal company, and they do update it every couple of years. So I think that there might be a new one coming out here soon. I'll see if I can find it. Basically what they do is they do a calibration of what renovations cost, and they rate what the return would be to a homeowner. And what's nice is it's a percentage. So as I was speaking about different property values, we can apply the percentage to try to get it correct for that property, high end or low end. So if you go through the property and they've done a renovation, all new hardwood, I can probably say what was the cost of that hardwood. We can take about 60 to 80% of that and add that in as the upgraded price, or as the case may be, reduce it, right? So like what I like down here, for example, is they've got a remodeled kitchen. So if one of my comps, so my house is a basic property, and then one of the comps has a fully renovated kitchen. They're telling me the average quality reno is 15 to 30 or high end. So we've got a range here. So let's say we're dealing with this one. We would know that comp, we would probably want to subtract out, $10,000 to $20,000 for the kitchen reno to bring it in line with the subject that didn't have a renoed kitchen yet. Okay. So you can see there's lots of things. Here's the basement development one, right? So the comp doesn't have a finished basement and my subject does. Then I can see the range that they're giving for a finished basement. We can make some adjustments based on, has it got, granite and a wet bar, obviously the value is going up, or if it's just a basic reno. And then we can see that a finished basement, we're only getting 50 to 75% cost back on. So you can say to your client, what did you pay for your basement reno? We paid 40. Okay, we can take about, it looks like we could probably take about 20 to 30% or 20 to 30,000 and put that in as value. Okay, so you're working with them on renos that they've done. Otherwise, you've got this cheat sheet to show you what cost of things would be that you can use. So this goes through siding, roof. So your client has a new roof or the comp has a new roof. We know that we're actually pretty high. It's got pretty good return. If that new roof cost $5,000, we're probably able to get $4,000 to $5,000 for that. So this is a really, really great resource. You can see the windows in there. We've got lots of different upgrades, all the electrical, utility stuff. Here's garage information. So there's lots. So this is going to help you with a ballpark. So I'll send this resource to you so you guys have it. We also do have, let me just see if I can, I thought it was in my folder, but it's not. So I'm just going to try to find it up here, this guy. So this is a sheet that James and I have kind of built out. It talks again, you know, if the comp is inferior and the comp is superior. So for example, if my comp has an inferior kitchen, I'm probably maybe going to add in that $8,000 range depending on value. So this is a little bit of a cheat sheet, like less bathrooms or more bathrooms, flooring, bedrooms, parking. So there's some condo stuff in terms of floors. So if you were doing a condo and I, you know, was on the 8th floor and one of the comps was on the 16th floor, what kind of an adjustment am I doing for floors? Location, time, you know, condition, those kinds of things. So with these two resources, you may be able to start to get some numbers together. Again, you're still probably going to have some questions. One of the things that I say to the agents all the time is if you try to bring that difference between the comp and the subject to itself. So for example, you know, obviously the comp is going to have 3 or 4 things different than the subject property. I want to focus in on just one thing at a time. So let's just say location. Let's pretend these 2 houses are exactly the same. And the difference is one's, you know, backing onto a lake, a little community lake, and one's across the street backing onto houses. That's the only difference. What would a buyer pay for the lake view versus being across the street? That's the only difference. Everything else is exactly the same. If I took a buyer into both those properties, they were identical from top to bottom. Would the client pay 20 grand more to be backing a lake? Maybe. And if it was a higher price property, they might pay 30 more. So when you sort of segment out that change and make that difference the only difference, sometimes it's easier to think, what would a buyer reasonably be willing to pay for this? For example, if you had 2 houses exactly the same and one had a built-in vacuum system and one didn't, do you think a buyer would pay more for the house with a built-in vacuum system? Probably not. They'd like the vacuum system, but they're probably not going to pay an extra $1,000 for it, unless for some reason that buyer loves vacuum systems, but they may not pay an extra $1,000 for it. So they might just say, I would prefer the built-in vacuum, but I'm actually not willing to put more dollars up against it. So you need to be thoughtful about those kinds of things. Your client's going to give you a whole bunch of things that a seller, you know, they're going to talk about all their upgrades, and you have to decide what are things that buyers would pay for versus benefits that buyers would take over another property, but they're not willing to put more cash forward for it. A common example of this is hot tubs. Lots of buyers are like, I'll pick the house with the hot tub, but I'm not paying more for it. I would love to have it, but I don't really care if it's there or not. So I'll take it, it's a perk, but I'm not gonna offer necessarily more money for it, or if I am, only a small amount, you know? So there's things that fall into the bucket of like buyers don't really care. Great if it has it, but if not, not worried. So you need to be thoughtful of that too, which is why we usually are only adjusting for some of the bigger things and not the micro things, because the micro things end up just being a part. If the house has tons of small upgrades, then you can do an overall blanket for upgrades, but I'm not going to parcel those things out and do adjustment for everything. Okay. So I'll send you those 2 resources. I think next time when we meet, I'll show you where to go in and do CMAs. You know, there's 2 different places, like I said, Cloud CMA or Paragon CMA. Cloud CMA is much nicer from a presentation standpoint. Paragon is much easier from an adjustment standpoint, because Paragon stacks the properties side by side by side, and you're looking at lines all at once, and you can make those adjustments really easily. Cloud CMA has a way nicer presentation to the client, but you kind of have to keep track of where your adjustments are and kind of be shifting back and forth, but it looks fantastic. So you can use a combination of the 2. It's almost like the Paragon CMA is like your worksheet where you do sort of the background work and then transfer that information to Cloud CMA, especially until you get comfortable. So you know, Sarah, you're working through one right now. I appreciate it's a little bit challenging. I'm happy to do one as a demo if you want to, you know, work through that. And I don't know if you need help with it or if there's a timeline on it. If there's not, we can, you know, revisit it next week even and talk a little bit about how to work through that property.
It's kind of at the point where they know I'm a realtor, and I said, if you need help, let me know, just to
Yep.
kind of like, know. But they're really awkward, and I don't know if they want to use a realtor or if they want to even cross that boundary with me. So I'm at this point where if I start showing them all this stuff, it's like I don't want them thinking I'm being invasive.
Totally.
So I don't know what to do. But I want
think
I
you,
want the
I think you're
business.
right in that you just wait now until they initiate, you know, leave it for a little while. If you bump into them, you can, you know, but you want to be thoughtful because too much, if they're not ready and they're a bit awkward and nervous, then that might just push them away too. So you kind of have to gauge that a little bit, but great for you to start running the numbers on the background, like
It's
behind
like
the scenes.
for me, yeah. Like it's,
Yeah.
I can
So-
put it in paper, yeah.
And the other thing that I really like for you guys to get practice at CMAs is to go visit an open house on the weekend, you know, pop into one, say, hey, I'm a realtor, here's my card, I just want to check the property out. You can even say I'm previewing it for a client, or I was just in the area, decided I wanted to take a look, you know, whatever, that's totally fine. It's an open house anyways, so who cares? Then go home, pull up the listing and do a CMA on it. Run your own CMA and see how the realtor's pricing worked out. You guys will get really good at you know, like I used to have all our realtors do it whenever they did an open house for another agent. Like you just did one, Sarah, for somebody, I think last weekend.
Yeah, a couple weekends ago.
Yeah, do a CMA on that property. You know, I've had a couple of my realtors come back to me. They're like, I think the realtor's like $30,000 or $40,000 high. And I'm like, yeah, they might be. So let's see what happens. Let's watch it. Let's see what happens on price. And it's kind of interesting to do that, but it's really good practice for you guys. And it's way easier to do those on your own time without the pressure, and it becomes a conversation, right? So I definitely think that you should start practicing that. Do you guys know where to go into Paragon and stuff to do the CMA stuff?
I don't know if I have access to this stuff yet.
You don't. That's
Yeah,
right. You
that's
don't.
what I was wondering. But that's okay. I'll watch through it next week anyway.
Yeah, let me just have a quick look here, because I think what I'll do next week is I'll actually run through a little bit of the CMA just so you can kind of see how it works. And I will email you guys a sample of my listing presentation that I do. It's kind of piecemeal together from different resources over time, and I kind of plunked in different bits, but I'll send it so you guys can have a look. It's an older one. I just have a copy of it saved into the file, so I'll share that with you. I do a printed version for my clients because I think that people, especially when you're delivering a lot of content, they like to have something tangible that they can look at, and it gets left out and they can flip through it and stuff. So, you know, mine is printed. I know a lot of agents, technology and stuff, go to electronic, you can do both or whatever. I just still find that like when I'm going through pricing, I like to write on it, I circle it, I'm like, this house is really similar to yours, this one is, you're better than this one. I get like buy-in because I engage with them over the document, which doesn't happen as much electronically. So that's how I still do mine. But I'll send you guys a bunch of resources, and then we'll look at actually kind of fumbling through a little bit of a demo CMA, so you can sort of see what that looks like. Okay. Perfect. I will let you get on with your days. I know we're a little bit over. Yeah, go ahead.
This is a very fast question too. For like social media posting, if I go browse some open houses, am I allowed to record the house and then post it?
You have to get permission from the seller.
Okay.
Which would be through the listing agent. So if I was you, what I would do is I would go in, I would say, hey, I'm so-and-so with this brokerage. I'm touring a few open houses today. I was hoping that maybe you'd be okay letting me post a little, hey, open house tour on my social media page. How do you feel about that? You need to get consent. And some of those agents might say no, some might be like, have at her because it's extra exposure. I'm not worried about it. Make sure you have your card so that they have all your contact info and they know. But I definitely would make sure you get permission first.
Okay.
Yeah. And some agents, like if it's in our office, I don't think that our agents would really care at all. But another brokerage, sometimes I don't know. Sometimes people are like, it's all exposure. I think, why wouldn't you? But you never know, right?
Yeah. Okay.
So yeah. Yeah. All right.
No, thank you.
Okay. Yep. No worries, you guys. I'll let you hit on your way.
Bye.
Okay. Talk to you soon.